Hey everybody, and welcome to the webinar from the University of North Texas, Workplace Inclusion and Sustainable Employment. You probably know us as UNT-WISE. And you're here with us this morning as we're going to have our speaker, Dr. Denise Catalano, who's going to be presenting on why maintaining your own wellness is an ethical issue in rehabilitation counseling. My name is Noreen Jalloway Gill, and I'll be your monitor for today. To get us started, I'd like all of you to go to your GoToWebinar control panel. And as you go down that panel, you will notice that there is a question box. And hopefully if you find that question box, that's where you will continue to communicate with us throughout the webinar. In fact, we've already got one message that came in. But let's see if the rest of you can hear us. And if you can hear me okay, I've got a couple more messages coming in that you can hear me fine. And so let's see if all of you that are on, if you could go ahead and sign in. We actually use this as also as a kind of a check and balance in terms of all the people who have registered and that you've actually signed in today, and so that we can line it up with the portal when we put in your CEU credits. So if you would go ahead and sign in that you hear me okay, and that things are working well. Okay, got several more coming in. That's awesome. I really appreciate that. So also in your control panel, as you go down, you'll see the handout. If you did not receive the handout already, which you should have with the confirmation of your registration, you'll see the PDF file sitting there that's going to be today's presentation. So let's go ahead and think about what we're going to be working on today and our own wellness. So we're very excited to have Dr. Catalano with us today. She is an associate professor and graduate coordinator for rehabilitation counseling here at the University of North Texas. She's also presented numerous times in both regional, state, and national conferences on the topics of well-being among rehabilitation counselors. We really have actually enjoyed reading her research, and she does have a lot of interest in exploring the roles of resilience and adjustment to traumatic injuries, and has published numerous articles on that topic. So without further ado, Dr. Catalano, thank you so much for your time today, and it's all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us on this presentation. I think before we get started, I'm going to practice what I'm going to be talking about, which is, I don't know if everybody else kind of, was trying to get a lot of things done before they got started with this webinar, but how about, if you're all right with this, if everybody just takes maybe about 3 breaths and breathe in and count to 6, and then breathe out to a count of 6. And let's just kind of relax and get present and focused and just take a few minutes just for ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and count just to kind of help you with this. But let's breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe out. You can breathe out through your mouth with a real type of breath. And then breathe in again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's breathe out with a empty out those lungs. And then let's just take one more breath, breathing in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again another breathing out. And now we can return to breathing normally. But hopefully you feel just a little bit more relaxed. I actually do an exercise on campus when I teach classes here, and I've actually done it at national presentations where I walk people through a breathing exercise, and on campus we actually do biofeedback for about 15 minutes before I start the actual class. And I've done this for many years now, and students definitely tell me at the end of the semester that that was one of the things they looked forward to, other than me, but that's one of the things they look forward to coming to class to start doing, because our classes start at 5:30. They've had a rough day. Trying just to get here is a stressful thing. And knowing that they were going to have 15, 20 minutes just to breathe and relax really meant a lot to them. And it also helped, I think, us stay more focused on what we were talking about for the class. And that's why I do think that this is something, just taking care of ourselves, taking, some time to really, get our own focus on the present, really is an ethical issue for us when we're working with clients. I often use the example of, a client comes in to see you, and you guys all know this. I used to be a VR counselor, so I am, certainly aware of many of the stresses. I won't pretend like I know what everybody goes through, but I do know that it can be very stressful when you're meeting one client after another who has a high needs. And for some, they just needed to be listened to. And when they come in and they're kind of stressed, then they meet up with me, and I'm sitting there looking at a list of 50 phone calls I have to return, and 100 emails that just came in since yesterday, and just the anticipation of everything that I had to get done. Now my stress level increases, and so they come in and they're talking, and I sometimes realize I wasn't really hearing what they were saying. I was hearing them, but I wasn't really listening deeply to what they were saying. And I do think that as counselors, that's our ethical responsibility, because the welfare of our client is our #1 priority. And that means we have to be present, and we have to be able to focus on what their needs are and what they're saying, and listen to them so that we can respond appropriately and not just do a kind of knee-jerk reaction like, okay, I picked up on a few words that you said, I got it, I know what you're saying, I hear you. Okay, we're going to do this, this, and that. And maybe that's not at all what the client really needed. Maybe with just a little bit more listening and reflection and with the client, maybe you would realize that, okay, this is really more where they wanted to be heard. They didn't need me to provide them with a bunch of stuff. So anyway, I do think that's why this is an ethical concern, that about our ability to take care of ourselves. We also have to model, I think, we're role models often for our clients, whether or not. But I think we also have to, demonstrate to them, if we're asking them to take care of themselves because of health issues that they have, whether they be physical or mental health issues, if we're asking them to take care of themselves, then I think it helps for them to at least know that you are trying yourself to do the same thing. I don't think we should pretend that we're perfect, or that, we're all eating, the foods that we're supposed to be eating, and drinking the water, and exercising, and getting the proper amount of sleep. And, I think we all struggle, I would suspect, I don't know. But of people I know, we all continue to struggle with trying to do that on a daily basis. Clients are doing the same thing. But I think it helps when we can support them by helping them see that, yeah, it's our struggle too, and here's what I do to try to deal with that. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of set up that this isn't a presentation of, hey, this is what I do, and, you guys should be doing this too, but just about really emphasizing the importance of realizing your well-being is important. And in order for you to really help others, it's helpful for you to be more aware of that you're meeting your needs, and therefore you are more open to hearing from your clients, and be more open to hearing what they are expressing to you as to what their needs really are. And that's, again, because our priority is the consumer's welfare. That's why I think this is an ethical issue, because if we're not listening, then we're not practicing as ethically competent practitioners. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide here, just to give you an idea of, well, what it is that we're going to be talking about. Let's see. There we go. I hope I didn't hit this twice. Anyway, what I thought we'd talk about today, or I'd share with you, is the idea of counselor burnout. And I want to differentiate, and we'll do that in just a few moments, between counselor burnout and depression. They are, not they're two separate things. I mean, obviously, you can imagine that they're highly correlated in some way, but it's not the same thing by any means. Burnout is more of the ethical issue for counselors, and I know that's a term that probably you hear frequently from people. Maybe you hear about it in terms of someone saying another person seems to be really burnt out. And so I think again, I don't want to make assumptions, but I would think from my own experience, everyone used the term burnout and it kind of conveyed the same message. Like, this person just really seems to be a bit exhausted working with clients, and they just don't seem to have the energy and the enthusiasm that they used to have. And so I think we all kind of have I don't like using labels, but burnout does convey kind of an image, and I think we all probably have a sense of what that looks like. But what's important is to not only understand really what burnout is, but also understanding what the impact of burnout is. And then what are some of the factors that lead to burnout? Because again, you have to be able to identify, these things that are going on either personally or in your environment that may be triggers for leading to burnout. And then how do you know if you're burnt out? I mean, that's kind of a conundrum, in that if you're burnt out, can you recognize that you're burnt out? It's kind of like the idea of, like, if you're depressed, are you able to recognize depression? Because that's your framework. That's your way of looking at the world with, negative thinking and sadness and so forth. And if that's your frame of the world, can you recognize when other people are depressed? We used to have that discussion here with faculty, because it was just kind of a interesting thing to, just debate. And then what can you do to avoid, to minimize burnout, so basically, what are the steps and strategies that you might be able to implement to take care of yourself? I am going to tell you right now that I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't already know. I think the thing that's really critical to try to figure out is, okay, we know the things to do to take care of ourselves: eating properly, sleeping, getting enough, being involved in social activities and so forth. Sometimes the challenge is, how do I get there? How do I do it? I've got so much on my plate that I have to do. When do I carve out time for myself? There are people who I have no doubt who are listening to this presentation who are much more successful at it than others. But what I'm hoping is that maybe some people can give some suggestions as we open up, to questions and comments. But I also think there's probably people listening who like me, just are always looking for opportunities to remind myself, hey, you need to make sure that you're eating healthy, and don't just grab a donut in the coffee room for breakfast. Make sure that you have something more substantial. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. So burnout itself is an actual concept. It's not just this vague, description of things. It actually was recognized and defined as a syndrome of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment that can occur among individuals who work with people in some capacity. And so there's some really key words in there: the emotional exhaustion, the depersonalization, and that's really a concern, I think, as counselors, is at what point are we burned out enough where we really don't honor our clients as being the individuals that are our main concern in serving? I remember being in a hospital. I was in a hospital. I was visiting somebody, and I was listening to the nurses talking outside in the common area where all the files and everything are. And my God, I thought, do they realize there are actually people in these beds? Because it really was as if they were talking about objects. And again, was that a sign of burnout? Was that just the culture of the way that, they talked about the many patients they were working with, but that kind of is what depersonalization is all about, where you're just not really recognizing the person as being a person. And then also feeling yourself that you're not accomplishing what you want to accomplish. And that can then, you know, again, be very stressful because you're constantly kind of fighting yourself to do more. And sometimes we fight against ourselves, you know, very unsuccessfully. So again, you know, just looking at these different, you know, concepts, the emotional exhaustion, what that ends up leading to is that we have a more difficult time expressing empathy or feeling empathy towards our clients. So that's a real concern because that's really a fundamental aspect of being a counselor, is trying to be able to see the world through the client's eyes. But again, if we're not able to do that because we're just sitting there so exhausted, you know, again, are we really listening to what our client and really trying to understand what our client is what's happening to our client? Depersonalization, the detachment from clients and the negative attitudes towards clients and the work itself. Again, I worked as a VR counselor myself up in the Madison, Wisconsin office. Loved what I was doing, had great coworkers, but there were times when things would get very stressful in the office that sometimes, you know, people would say things that would really make you think, wait a minute, are you really here to help the clients or just criticize them? I mean, people found a way of relieving their stress sometimes by picking up on some of the, you know, kind of idiosyncrasies of some of the clients. And again, I mean, I think that was more a result of just being burnt out because at that time I had a client caseload of about 200 people. The average in the office was probably about 150 to 160 clients. It was a very busy office because we were on the bus stop. We were in a one-stop, which meant that people who were coming for services, food stamps, VA services, etc., everything was in one building. And so a lot of people were steered into our office who didn't necessarily need services, but we still had to go through, you know, interviewing and determining if they would be eligible. So it was a very stressful environment, very busy environment. And then reduce personal accomplishment. Just again, beating yourself up for what you're not getting done. And these are all components of burnout. So it's a slow degradation of the counselor's ability to empathize with clients over time. And although I know there's a number of different therapeutic approaches that I'm sure you all use, you know, working with your clients, I would suspect that underneath all of them there's probably the Rogerian concept of unconditional regard for your clients, being transparent yourself, you know, being who you are with the client, and then demonstrating empathy. And having the ability to demonstrate empathy. So that's a real critical part of the person-centered approach, and of course our whole field is person-centered. So that really, burnout can really cause a problem, and when you have that happening in the office or you have that happening with coworkers, it sometimes, you know, kind of is like a magnet, and everyone starts thinking, yeah, wait a minute, that's how I feel, or yeah, that's not right, or yeah, we shouldn't have to do that. Kind of, it can sometimes kind of be a little bit contagious. And really that's really the time where we need to step back and we need to remind ourselves and find ways to support our coworkers who are having difficulty in, okay, I think you know, maybe we need to talk to somebody. Maybe we need to have kind of a support group here, not criticizing the clients and all the demands on us by our supervisors, but maybe a support group to remind us of what we are accomplishing. Because if you can shift that framework to, yeah, we're busy, but look at all the people we're serving, it just shifts the, you know, kind of the feeling about it, and hopefully kind of helps getting you people out of that negative thinking, that negative framework. And again, it's different than depression. Depression is certainly a far more complicated syndrome or disorder where you've got the cognitive, the emotional, you've got the, the somatic, just the way it makes people feel, the fatigue and so forth. Not that those aren't some of the characteristics of burnout, but burnout is really specific to the employment setting. It really is specific to work and the relationships within the work environment. People can be burned out in their work environment and then go home and just feel relieved. And although I'm going to suspect that if you're stressed out and you're burnt out from what you're doing as a job, there is no doubt that it carries over into your other relationships, with people. And again, that's where we have to kind of, make sure we've got the support we need so that people can kind of help us again, shift our framework, shift our perspective, and that hopefully helps. So it affects individuals, and the individuals may not even acknowledge or realize, that it's due to the stress associated with their job. And what's most critical to us in our field is that it's really prevalent among people who work in continuous and intense contact with other individuals. Again, we work with sometimes a very high need population of individuals, and we're trying to serve those needs, and that can really take its toll on people in terms of always giving to others. And I'm going to, just kind of set the idea right now that if you keep giving to others, but you don't do anything to replenish your own energy, then you are going to burn out. It's just kind of inevitable. Stibnecki, who is a faculty member over at, where is he, East Carolina. And so he's done a lot of work on what he has termed empathy fatigue. And the idea of empathy fatigue, as he defines it, is that it's a dynamic state of psychological, emotional, social, physical, occupational, and spiritual, which I think is he's a very spiritual person, spiritual exhaustion that occurs on a continuum, resulting from the helper's own wounds that are continually revisited by their clients' life stories of stress, chronic illness, mental and physical disability, trauma, grief, and loss. So if you think about it, you are working with one client after another, and if you're talking with them about the issues going on in their life, trying to make sure, where are they at, if they are dealing with stress, and more than likely they are, illness, the impact of the disability on their functioning, the way their life has changed because of this disability, their inability to achieve their goals that they had set, because of the disability or because of attitudes towards them because of their disability. You're revisiting these stories over and over and over all day long, and it ends up really kind of accumulating in impacting your own perception of the world, in the sense that it makes you realize that, kind of touches your own stress, your own inability to achieve goals. It just really, again, it just kind of is like this vicious circle. But this empathy fatigue is really unique for individuals who work very closely with other individuals, especially in the counseling field. So again, nurses, social workers, rehab counselors, people that work in child protective services. I mean, you are working with people that are more vulnerable, and you are more vulnerable yourself then for experience this empathy fatigue. So it's a natural artifact of working with patients that have these intense conditions, mental health conditions, behavioral health issues. And many times it's a very unconscious process where the professional and those around them may not even recognize that you are starting to have empathy fatigue. It's also sometimes referred to in other terms, vicarious traumatic experience. Throughout the counseling literature, it may be referred to in different ways, but it all comes back to that idea of we are, as counselors, trying to be aware and see how the client sees the world so that we can more accurately and more appropriately help the client address those issues. And by revisiting those issues the client is telling you about, one client after the next, after the next, after the next, that really all can lead to your own empathy fatigue. And again, if you're not taking care of yourself, and if you're not getting the social support or the support for people who kind of might say, hey, you know, you seem to really be coming in every day dragging yourself, you know, what's going on? We support our clients. It's so important, I think, that we all support each other as well. So, let me back up because that's my favorite slide. Let's see if I can get back to it. Sorry, I think I hit something too soon. What is going on? I'm sorry, give me just a moment to get, while I'm doing this, just take some deep breaths and breathe. And this is my favorite slide because it just makes me, you know, just visually, this is often what happens when we just are giving, giving, giving. We're like the little energy bunny. And if we don't replenish ourselves, this is what we end up looking like. So I like visual cues, and this kind of is a great visual cue of what empathy fatigue can look like among us. All right, so now we're going to move on to why is this important, and I think already from everything that I've been saying, I'm sure that you've already picked up the theme as to why this is an important issue. First of all, it's the impact on your own well-being and your own physical health and well-being. In our program, we have had, I've been here for 10 years, we have always had VR counselors who have been coming through the program. We have an online program. We also have an on-campus program. And so we have often, I mean, I can't tell you how many students have come through that were VR counselors to get their master's degree so they could also go on and get their CRC. And for some of them, boy, it was like I could see them kind of deteriorating through the semester, because not only were they in a high demand job during the day, but now they're having to come to campus to be in a graduate program, which also is very demanding. Particularly on their time. It's not anything that they're not, you know, people aren't capable of doing. It's just you have to have the time to read and to think and to reflect and do some of the assignments. And boy, there were some counselors where I just really had we just often talked about wellness, because I could see they weren't addressing their own wellness, and I could visually see it in the way that their health seemed to be deteriorating over time. And that's a very sad thing to see, because you know they chose this field because they really wanted to help others, but they didn't take care of themselves, so eventually some of these individuals had to leave this field. They couldn't continue handling it the way they did. And it's just unfortunate that they didn't find, you know, the right supports that they needed so that they could keep doing what they were doing. And that was a loss to the field, a loss to the clients, and certainly a loss to them in being able to do what it is that they wanted to do. It also affects the quality of the service provided to the client. And again, here's where the ethics comes into it. You may not recognize the client is really trying to describe something, you know, very profound and a very traumatic experience to you, and you're kind of distracted by your own stress, your own anticipation of the many things you have to do as soon as this client leaves your office, and you're not really picking up on what the client is really trying to tell you. It also may lead to where you overdiagnose and pathologize clients, because again, the way you're looking at the world yourself is perhaps more impacted by your own negative thinking, and so then it's real easy to pick up on things that aren't really there, and that's often a problem in terms of overdiagnosing or seeing problems with in the client's lives or the client's experience that aren't really there or aren't as much of a problem as you think it is. And also just, again, becoming increasingly less attuned, less empathetic with the clients. It's almost like, yeah, you think you got problems, you know, and the reality is, yes, the client has problems, and yes, you have problems, but at some point there's a tipping point where your problems start really affecting the way you're addressing the client's problems. And so when you're tending to your own issues at the expense of the client's issues, that's where it becomes an ethical conflict. And that's where you have to really step back, or hopefully have someone working with you that you are close enough with who can say, I think do you need to take some time? I know that's probably ridiculous. I'm sure anyone who's out in, listening to this, that's a super probably thinking, yeah, if I could give all my staff the time they need to kind of recoup, we'd all be working 2-day weeks. And maybe that's not such a bad idea. But the reality is that we do have to find a way of blending our own needs being met with meeting the needs we have in our work setting, our employers, our clients. But the problem is, at any point when the one starts affecting, then really no one is being served. And that's the awareness that I just hope that you walk away from this with, is that, okay, where am I at on this continuum? And I'm sorry, I'm going to stop using animations in my PowerPoints because they just are kind of distracting, not so much helpful. Okay. So in terms of where this falls in our ethical code, there is Section D of the Ethical Code for Rehabilitation Counselors by the Commission on Rehabilitation Counselor Certification that talks about our own professional competence. And there is an actual standard that says we are supposed to be monitoring our own effectiveness. So rehab counselors continually monitor their effectiveness as professionals and take steps to improve when necessary. Rehabilitation counselors take reasonable steps to seek peer supervision as needed to evaluate their efficacy as rehabilitation counselors. And sometimes this is what gets lost when we just get so absorbed in our jobs and working with so many clients and trying to meet so many other people's needs, is we stop monitoring our own effectiveness. And, hopefully you'll kind of think about after, this, I hope you think about this issue, as after the presentation, and kind of start strategizing your own way of how do I make sure that I am being as effective as possible with my clients and not letting them not have my full attention because I'm stressing about the fact that I woke up this morning and I don't have any internet service in my house, which is exactly what happened to me today. So by the time I got here, I was already kind of frustrated because, like, oh, now I got to call, the cable company, and I've got to deal with this, deal with that. And luckily I had the opportunity to just put that all aside because I knew I was doing this presentation and I knew I could talk about something that was really important to me with people who are really interested in hearing it. So that just really changed my framework. I'll deal with the internet, later on, but right now I can focus on what I'm doing, which is talking to you. And waiting for the slide to change.
Denise?
Yeah, I don't know if
it's... This is Nori.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're fine in terms of it taking a little bit of time. You're probably right. It's the animations that's getting in the way. But we did have a couple of comments if you want me to.
Oh, good timing. Good timing.
Okay. And just to share with everybody that this presentation it does need all the requirements for both rehabilitation counselors and their continuing education credits, as well as the ethics portion of what our community rehabilitation providers must meet in terms of meeting their criteria for vocational rehabilitation. There was actually a question on that. But one of the comments, and I guess this goes back to when you were describing the depersonalization, is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as systems burnout? Seems like the structure tends to be depersonalized. I'm guessing
So
that's the structure of
the bureaucratic structure, so to speak, in terms of the bureaucracy that you have to go through to get things done to be able to serve clients. Is that the idea?
That's what it sounds like to me. Is that systems approach and what the system demands from you, and depersonalizing it, I guess, is where that connection is.
Oh, you know what? That's a really interesting. That's an interesting perspective of it. That's interesting. You know, that I'm kind of thinking about myself, because is the very nature of how we are serving clients in terms of the documentation that has to be kept. I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm sure everybody would be able to see far more clients if you didn't have to spend 1-2 hours a day documenting everything that you just did with that client that you met for maybe 40 or 50 minutes. You know what, I don't know if that's depersonalizing it. That's an interesting perspective on that. I have an answer for that, but that is a really thoughtful comment. And,
something for us to think about.
Yeah, I mean, is it fair to ask if others have any thoughts on that, or?
Sure, if they can, they certainly can send those in, and
Yeah.
then at some other point,
Yeah, that's a
we can
good
share
point.
that.
Because I will be talking about also about, you know, the role that bureaucracy has in terms of burnout, and so that is, you know, kind of overall the way that our organizations, our agencies, and so forth are structured can lead to burnout. But the depersonalization aspect of it is really interesting. That's really interesting. Okay, now I'm going to be thinking about that. so thank you.
And the majority of the people who are listening today are actually community rehabilitation providers. So they're working with the counselor to provide those services. And there's different kinds of systems, structures, and responsibilities and mandates that I think need to be paid attention to. But at the same time, that I think that maybe what you said is sort of like, we've done our job, we've worked with the individual, and now we're in the documentation and systems part of it. And so where does the burnout happen?
Well, and yeah, and I do know, you know, because we have a number of students here in our program also that work with community support programs, working directly with consumers of VR services, and they not only have the documentation, but then they go to the VR office and they're in the VR counselor's office while the counselor is doing documentation, and it does all seem to be it all does take its toll in terms of the time necessary to do it, and trying to describe things in as objective a way. I mean, that's what I actually do a webinar on case documentation, and the idea that you have to present information about your client in as objective behavioral terms as possible, in a way does depersonalize. I mean, I got to say, I can't help but think that it certainly does depersonalize the client, because you have to be careful not to use words that are ambiguous or vague, or the client seemed really down today. I mean, you can't really say that they seem down, because somebody else reading those notes would go, well, what does down mean? So you have to really be very articulate and describe things, hopefully, ideally, in behavioral terms, so there's no misinterpretation, but does that, you know, kind of take you away from who the client is as a person and just trying to describe them in these, you know, ideally objective behavioral terms. So that's, again, that just kind of, maybe the system itself does lend itself to depersonalization. Another thing, and again, because you do want to get this will give you ethics credits, and the one expectation in being able to do a presentation that you get ethics credit for is that I directly tie how this topic does relate to the ethical code that we're all responsible for following. So I would say the main category that it impacts is that professional competence. And another thing, of course, is the very first ethical code, ethical section, the counseling relationship, where the client's welfare. I mean, that's the umbrella over which all the rest falls. Everything is for the client's welfare. So again, that's one of the ethical standards this relates to. But also the impairment, again, making sure you yourself are alert to the signs of impairment from your own physical, mental, emotional problems. And ideally, you're supposed to refrain from offering or providing professional services when such impairment is likely to harm clients or others. You're to seek assistance for the problems that reach the level of professional impairment, and if necessary, you limit, you suspend, or terminate your professional responsibilities until such time it is determined that they may safely resume their work. When I've given this presentation in person, to different groups, that usually always gets a response from the audience, because they imagine going to their supervisor and saying, you know, I really need to have a mental health day today, so I'm going to cancel my appointments and you know, maybe just do some case management work or something. Maybe supervisors, maybe, you know, people would be like, oh, that's good because that's ethically responsible of you. Or I would suspect more than likely it's like, hey, as a counselor, you're supposed to be able to deal with that. And again, you know, sometimes you've just got to figure out, where are you at, and are you in a place where with your clients, you're sitting in that room talking with them, are you at a place where you are really able to focus and listen to what they're saying, or do you really feel like the best thing in the client's interest, which would be the ethical thing to do, is to reschedule that appointment for a time where you know that you can be present for them. And maybe, and that is sometimes we did in our office. On certain days, Fridays in particular, those were the days we were encouraged not to schedule appointments with our clients and just focus on getting case management work done, because that was always hanging over our heads in terms of getting those case notes in terms of getting those plans, you know, put into the computer, and that was a constant stress. So what our office did was try to find a happy medium where, okay, you're going to have this day where you can just really focus on that and not, you know, meet with your clients. And that actually was very helpful because you knew you had that time. But again, this main point of this ethical standard is being alert to your own impairments and being able to, you know, respond. And that you assist your colleagues or your supervisors, because supervisors deal with it too. I mean, my gosh, they're between the administration and you. They're trying to serve you. They're trying to serve the administration. I mean, we're all kind of caught, you know, between two forces. And rehabilitation counselors, hopefully we can assist our colleagues, our supervisors in recognizing their own professional impairment and provide consultation and assistance when warranted. It might not be so easy to do with, you know, supervisors, because they may feel, hey, you take care of yourself, I'll take care of myself, but thanks. On the other hand, you know, we are all counselors and we all have strategies. We're all professionals. We all have our strategies of how to interact with others in a way to make it a constructive discussion, not one in which, you know, either party, you know, has to become defensive about things. So sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, of noticing that somebody seems to be really, quiet or down, or, sometimes just bringing something to somebody's attention opens the door, obviously, for them to realize, hey, maybe you'll listen to me. So this is part of our ethical code, so it's really something that is important to realize. The next slide is going to talk about the consequences of burnout, if it gets there. There we go. So the consequences of burnout, or empathy fatigue, or compassion fatigue. Again, how do you differentiate between these very, similar concepts? But the consequence is the same no matter what you are going to call it. Poor job performance, low productivity. I mean, it's hard to come in, just ready to go when you're feeling like, oh my God, I feel like I just left. And being ineffective, increased absenteeism. That is something that was clear to me, not only in the office that I was working at as a counselor, but I used to work in the hotel business, and I was responsible for the front office staff. And boy, when people were not, when people were tired of taking call after call, guest after guest, if the best way I could tell when people were really starting to, kind of suffer a bit was looking at their time card and recognizing that there's a lot of absentee individual. That was always a real clear sign. Turnover, having turnover in your office, turnover, with the individuals you're working with. I think it's interesting, one of the, and this is from a literature review that I've done about this topic, all of these consequences are from what's is in the literature, so it's not just my perceptions of these. But often people, because of being burnt out, they seek administrative jobs. For some reason, maybe there's the perception, they don't explain why that is, I think it's an interesting thing, but maybe they perceive that, there'd be less demands on them from all directions if they were in a job away from clients, away from, the people that we're serving. I don't know, but I think that's kind of interesting. Feelings of guilt, because we do feel like, well, we're supposed to be there for our clients, and yet I'm just not. Family problems, again, I don't think you can separate, like when you walk out of the job, that, okay, now I'm with my family and all is, good. Obviously a source of comfort for individuals, often to be able to get out of work and go home and be with their family, but obviously sometimes we bring our family problems with us, or our work problems with it, and affects our relationships in the family. Social and personal dysfunction, complacency, and overall just poor health and well-being. So it affects every area of our life, as individuals, psychologically, socially, our relationships. It really can have a profound effect. And again, you think about the affective impact and the cognitive impact of these. Burnout may lead to depression. It may lead to you having anxiety because you feel you're not being effective in your job, and oh my God, I'm letting things fall through the cracks, and I'm going to get called into the supervisor's office or the DAR's office, or somebody's going to get on my back about this. The inability to show empathy, you start kind of feeling down on yourself, that you're not able to manage, your life the way you think you should be able to. Negative feelings towards clients, boredom, apathy. I mean, again, very negative aspects of burnout on your affect, your emotions. Cognitively also impacts you. The more stress you're feeling, the more likely you are to forget things. The more likely you are to have a difficulty concentrating on things. Because you're so focused on what is bothering you, and that you're just not being effective. You're so focused on that, you're just not paying attention to the other things around you, and therefore they're not really entering your consciousness, and therefore you are forgetting things, and you're not able to see things in your environment that might be good resources for you to use when you are at your most vulnerable. People are also less likely to acknowledge or discuss these symptoms because, again, we're supposed to be counselors, and we're supposed to be able to handle these things. We handle we try to help our clients handle them. So what happens when we aren't feeling like we can handle it? All right, what's going on with this thing? Here are some factors that are associated with burnout. First of all, the size of the caseload. The more clients you're dealing with, the more likely you are to have burnout, and that just seems a little bit logical in that you just have so many people that you're interacting with. The difficulty of client problems. Sometimes we have a caseload of individuals with very high needs. Every client we're dealing with has very high needs, and that is something that can easily lead to burnout because you're dealing with one high-need client after another after another. Clients with excessive demands. Time spent in direct care of clients leads to burnout. Working in rural settings can lead to burnout, and primarily that's because there's a lack of resources available to you for serving those clients, and so that can be very stressful. I used to work a rural caseload in Wisconsin. There was no bus service out to where my clients lived, and it was always a challenge of how do I get them transportation to that job interview, or hopefully they get the job. How are they going to get to the job on a daily basis? That was an ongoing struggle. Having a lack of supervisor support. Definitely, if you don't have that support, that can lead to your burnout because you feel kind of alone there. Lack of recognition for good work. Sometimes you can get through a lot if you just at least know people are aware of what you're doing and how hard you're working to try to meet everyone's needs. Just knowing that people are aware of that sometimes can make a difference. The amount of education and training received, they have found that people who have more education, higher education, tend to have less burnout. Maybe it's because they have more resources to consider in terms of strategies and way they're going to deal with things. Not sure why that leads to having less education leads to burnout, because certainly I think the argument could be made that, well, maybe I don't have a master's degree, but I've got 20 years of experience doing that. So again, you know, take some of these with just being aware that these are some of the factors considered in what could lead to burnout. Having unrealistic expectations. This is something that I know that I have tried to deal with as an educator. We often train, you know, students in our programs that, you know, the world of rehabilitation counseling and everything that it means is just, you know, the most fulfilling. You're helping people who are in need. It's just the best thing since sliced bread. But then they go out and they're working in the field and they're working in offices, you know, and they're finding out that, wait a minute, I had one student come back and say, why didn't you train us the way things are actually done? And I said, well, we're training you the way that things are to be done, with the client's interests always being in the forefront. What's going on maybe in your particular office, you know, is the culture of the office. But be a good role model. You know, try to adhere to the concepts and the principles that we have talked to you about. But I do try now to bring into my classes, and I have for many years, about some of the challenges working in the field. I don't want people going out thinking that, oh, this is just going to be you know, this is going to be great, a cakewalk, you know, everyone's just going to, you know, everything's going to work and fall into place so easily. It doesn't work that way. And so having unrealistic expectations definitely is a factor leading to burnout. Feeling that you're not in control over your work, I mean, that's a real difficult thing to have to deal with. Not being clear what your job actually is or how you're supposed to do things. I love it when our students are in offices where the supervisor really spends a lot of time going over the procedures and looking at what they're doing with their plans and their work and their case note. I know sometimes students don't like it. They're like, hey, I know what I'm doing. But I love it when supervisors are really involved in making sure that the employee really understands what the expectations are and what the procedures and policies are. It definitely helps lessen the ambiguity of what the person is supposed to be doing. And then years on the job. Newer clients, newer counselors tend to be more at risk of burnout than others. On the other hand, it goes the other extreme too. Counselors with longer years on the job may experience burnout, mainly because maybe they haven't been recognized for the work they're doing. Maybe they just weren't able to, have advancement opportunities. So on either end of the spectrum, there is a risk of burnout. And so I think those two populations of counselors and employees we really need to pay attention to and try to do what we can to support them so that we don't lose them before they even get started, or we don't lose those years of experience and knowledge because they feel nobody really recognizes what they're contributing. And then certainly a lack of family support. I would also say, this could go into a lack of social support. So what can you do? I love this idea of responsibility. We have the ability to respond. But often when we're stressed, we don't even take that moment to think about what our response is going to be. But I think if we can always think for a moment, there is a gap between what happened that we're responding to and our ability to respond to it. We've got to have that moment to kind of think about things. One of the things to think about is the way you handle your own stress in terms of what is your coping style. In the literature, there's different strategies that people have identified as being fairly consistent, where maybe people are more problem-focused, where they plan what they're going to do, they keep themselves from getting distracted. I know just here in my department, there are some faculty that are just able to just stay very focused on doing research and so forth, and then there are others, like myself, I have to be honest, where I just have so many competing interests that it's hard for me to stay focused on that, because I tend to stay more focused on planning and working with students and that. So again, problem focus depends on what the problem is that you're trying to focus on and how you go about addressing that. People also may have an emotion-focused coping style, where maybe they're more likely to want to go out with friends or coworkers and vent. Not that one is necessarily any better a style than others. It's just a matter of recognizing what your style is, and if it's not working for you, then maybe consider, okay, maybe if I planned a little bit better how I'm going to handle this situation or what I can do about this situation. Or, again, venting is not such a bad thing. It doesn't help when everybody's all venting and you're just all feeding each other. That's when somebody, it'd be nice if somebody would just step out of that for a moment and say, okay, we all agree that this is a problem. What are we going to do about it? I often leave meetings with, okay, this is great that we've talked about this issue. What are we going to do about it now? I want to talk a little bit about how the stress is impacting us physically. But one other, and again, I apologize, I should have thought how this method of the PowerPoint working was going to affect the presentation itself. I am learning from this now. But another style is avoidant coping. We tend to deny what's going on. We tend to just disengage. We go home, we turn on the TV, and we just sit on the sofa. And before we know it, it's been 4 or 5 hours, and we don't even really know what we're watching. We're just kind of, de-stressing. Some people stop at a bar and have, happy hour. It's an avoidant coping strategy. So again, you just have to think about which strategy do you predominantly use and how's it working for you. All right, let's see if...
Denise, while you have a little bit of a break here, there was actually a couple of other additions to some of our information earlier. And one of those was on the expectations from that are unrealistic. And the comment is that unrealistic expectations from clients and families also causes a high level of stress, and that some people think that counselors and community rehabilitation providers are miracle workers and they're going to solve all their problems.
Oh, so, absolutely. Absolutely. So let me just make sure that I'm understanding, because I understand the concept that clients often think you're a miracle worker, and what do you mean you're not going to help me get my son that ideal job? That was something I know I dealt with as a counselor. But are you also saying family expectations, because of what you do, tend to be unrealistic? Is that is
Right,
that what?
right, and especially the youth populations, as well as many of the older population individuals that people are working with. They may be living still in the family home, so they're going to be creating those expectations of people
Yeah.
haven't done this in the past, well, and you say you'll be able to do this, and so I can see where that's pretty stressful.
Absolutely. I think the reality is we live in a very, it's a stressful society. Actually, there is a book, and I'll talk about this in just a moment, about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. There's this book called Sympathetic Society, which the idea is that we are always in this fight or flight response, and it's all around us. Our families, where sometimes we have the expectation, again, that might go to unrealistic expectations, where we expect the family environment is going to be one where we can truly be ourselves and just relax, and they're going to support us. I don't know about anybody else, but my family situation growing up was, I mean, there was clearly not as much support as I would imagine a family would have had. Again, my unrealistic expectations. I always want to believe everybody's doing the best they can. And it's just a matter of sometimes recognizing that, okay, what they think, what they're doing is their thing. I have to find a way of not letting it impact the way I think about myself and what I'm doing. But that's hard to do when you're immersed in it all the time, whether it's at work, whether it's at home. Ideally you go home and it's like, oh great, I'm in this loving environment. But what happens when you walk in and you don't know what time your teenage child is coming home, and you tell them to come home at a certain time and they don't come home at a certain time, and you just feel like you don't have control over anything. And again, that's when I honestly think we all should have counselors on speed dial. I think we all benefit from having somebody in our support system that we can go to listen to us. Even if I have to pay you to listen to me, I want someone to listen to me that can kind of give me some feedback on what pattern do they hear me talking about here, so that I can break that pattern and try reframing things in a different way. But if I never change things, if nothing in my environment changes or my way of looking at it change, then everything will stay the same. And that's just kind of is that broken record type of thing. So sometimes we just have to take responsibility for ourselves and just say, you know what, I think I'm going to go for a walk, and I think I'm going to go work out, or I am going to, just go outside and sit and watch the dogs running around the yard or something. Sometimes you just have to be selfish and say, I need to do something for me. For some reason in our field, we feel that it's selfish if we put our needs in front of others. And maybe that's what draws us into this field. Maybe that's one of the personality characteristics that we all share, because we all want to help others. But sometimes we're doing it at the expense of our own needs, our own well-being. And that's something to think about, because there's nothing wrong with saying, I need time for me. So again, something for everybody to kind of think about in terms of where are they at on that continuum of, do I serve others all the time? Am I kind of in the middle where I have a good balance, which would be great? Am I on the other extreme where everything's all about me? Somehow we got to find a way of getting to that middle where we kind of balance, what we're doing and being useful and of service to others, but not at the expense of harming our own physical and mental well-being. And a lot of what we do involves stress. We are stressed in terms of we got to be somewhere at a certain time. We've got to help these clients that have these high needs. Oh, I got to call someone back. I get messages from clients saying you haven't called me back. You know, I mean, there's all sorts of things around us that are impacting our own stress level. And the way our body handles stress is we have these two nervous systems. I'm not going to get too much in the, the biology or the neuroanatomy of how this all works. I just kind of want to put out this kind of concept for you to kind of realize, and hopefully if you're interested you might look into it in more detail yourself. But there's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. It's that sympathetic nervous system that activates when our amygdala, which is in our brain, and that's what picks up on our fear signal. When we see something or feel something or have the impression of something around us that makes us want to protect ourselves, that activates the sympathetic nervous system. That's that fight or flight response. And that puts a lot of physiological responses of our body in action, because it just gets us ready to be able to fight or flight. On the other hand, when we're in a more relaxed state of mind, that's when the parasympathetic nervous system has been initiated. That's when we're at rest, we digest our food. It's a way of our body slowing down. And ideally we have a balance between when the sympathetic nervous system is active and when the parasympathetic nervous is active. But see, this is stressing me out, and I have to keep remembering to breathe and relax and not get frustrated with the computer for what I did, which was to try to make a dynamic, active presentation. But in talking about the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, the threat doesn't have to actually be real. We can just imagine things. It doesn't have to be actually a lion chasing us. It could be the anticipation of getting a call that our supervisor wants to see us, and immediately we start kind of thinking about what did I do, and that's enough right there to activate that sympathetic nervous system. And so what ends up happening is, again, different parts of the body are going to react as to whether or not the sympathetic or the parasympathetic system is active. So when we're in this flight or fight, you can imagine that our heartbeat starts beating more. Our body is getting us ready to run or to fight. And so therefore a lot of these body systems are getting us in that state to be able to do that. Excuse me. But then when the threat is over, or when we perceive that the threat is over, we are able to initiate then the parasympathetic nervous system, and that kind of slows down the heartbeat. It allows us, it stimulates the flow of saliva. There's all sorts of things that go on that put our body in that relaxation state. Just breathing, just like in the beginning of this presentation, I said let's take a few moments to just take some breaths, and relax. By doing that, just by breathing, in that way, taking in some deep breaths and letting them out, and doing that for, a few times, a few minutes, that activated the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, if I had said, let's breathe real fast, and breathe in and out as fast as you can, that would have activated your sympathetic nervous system. Just the way that you're breathing, which is why if you do yoga or you do any of the relaxation, meditation, focusing on your breath is the easiest way to be able to get yourself to get this parasympathetic nervous system active, which again slows you down. And if you can slow down enough to be more aware of what you're thinking, what you're doing, or why am I reacting this way, then you are more in control. And that often is really what we want. We want to be more in control of ourselves. We can't control others around us. We can't control, some things that we would probably like to. But we can control our own response to things. And if we can control our breathing and kind of slow ourselves down, we can be more aware of what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and be in a better place to make decisions about how we are going to respond. This book I was saying is called A Sympathetic Society, because we tend to live in a society where we are constantly bombarded with signals, of stress, fear, all of this. So we're constantly being, exposed to these signals that are activating our sympathetic nervous system. So what we want to try to do is be aware of that and slow it down by activating our parasympathetic nervous system, at least to balance the sympathetic nervous system. I mean, that's ideal. We just want to be able to, activate our flight or fight response when we need to, but also be able to be in a relaxed state of mind when there is really no threat around us. And the idea being is that if you're constantly mobilizing that energy, to fight or to flee, you never store it. It impacts your body, your muscles, your vascular system. It produces stress. Stress tells your body to produce cortisol, which is a hormone, which is what activates the sympathetic nervous system, as well as other bodily functions. But too much cortisol can really start wearing away. It can wear away your enamel, your tissues. Too much of it can start impacting your body in very negative ways. And then again, you can just see how that's kind of a vicious cycle, because when you're not feeling good, or when you're, you can't do things because of your body just isn't in a very healthy, state, then that just kind of creates, again, I can't do the things I want to do, I'm not in control of my life, it becomes a vicious cycle. There's a book that I often have students read when I teach a class on disability across the lifespan by Borisenko, and she talks a lot. Her book is all about using breathing and using the mind to help maintain better well-being. Knowing that mentally or physically worry is going to set you up for this vicious cycle. So again, if you can be aware of how this worrying and this stress is impacting you physiologically and mentally, and you try to find ways of counteracting it, one of the easiest ways being breathing exercises, then at least you are getting back some control over the way your body's reacting to the environment around you. So it's so easy to say, well, feel relaxed, feel positive, be secure, be confident. But by breathing and making sure that you are trying to initiate that parasympathetic nervous system when you can, that definitely helps, because that does naturally put you in a relaxed state of mind. And when you're in that relaxed state of mind, you're more likely to experience a sense of well-being. And in that state, you might very well start having some insights that you would not have had if you were still in that really stressed out, what am I going to do, what am I going to do, what am I going to do kind of state. So it's all part of that reframing, and again, breathing, biofeedback, that's a behavior. So if we can manage our breath and take control of our breathing pattern when, we breathe unconsciously, obviously, hopefully we are, but there are times where you can be aware, like, wow, I haven't taken a deep breath in. I need to just sit and kind of breathe for a few moments. You'll pay attention to how that's making you feel, because that will definitely, if the cognitive behavioral model, truly works, which there's so much support that says it does, if we can change that behavior, it's going to change our thoughts. And if we can change our thoughts, it's going to change the way we're feeling, our emotions. So again, the whole thing about the CBT model is that you change any one of those, behavior, thoughts, emotions, you will change the others. And the easiest thing we can do is change the way we're breathing, which is a behavior, and let that change, let that have an impact on changing our thoughts, and then having that either simultaneously or by changing our thoughts, changing the way we're feeling, affect our emotions. And that's one thing that we can do for ourselves. And by having these, more positive, healthy emotions, again, letting that relaxation response be as dominant, at least, as the sympathetic nervous system, then we do have improved memory. Too much cortisol impacts the tissues, and that impacts the way that our brain organizes memories and so forth. So by having more positive emotions, we're more likely to improve our memory. We're going to make better decisions. Making better decisions is going to improve our performance. It's going to give us that mental flexibility because we're going to see a wider scope of options for us. It improves your immune system, lowers blood pressure, improves your hormonal balance, longer lifespan. I mean, I'm not going to say this is the panacea that everything, just comes down to just breathing, well, but just having a positive outlook on things can really make a difference in our decisions and the way that our body reacts, which again is going to impact our decisions. There's a broaden and build theory by Barbara Friedenson. She actually wrote a book called Positivity. So again, just framing how these positive thinking and positive emotions impact us as individuals, as human beings. And her theory is that when we experience these positive emotions, we are able to see more or be aware of more in our environment, that maybe we recognize some resources or some ways of handling a situation that we would not have recognized otherwise. And the more resources we are aware of that we have, the less stressful it is. You guys know this as working with clients and being in the community. Often when I'm teaching case management, I remind people that you are as good as the resources you know about in your community. Because if you did not have if you were not aware of the resources that were available to you, you'd probably be always stressing out, how am I going to get the client from here to there? How am I going to have the client learn, better social skills? How am I going to have the client, practice interviewing techniques and so forth? But if you're aware of what's in your community, what's in your environment, then that really kind of takes the stress off, because you've got some resources to help you do that. And that's the idea of this, positive emotions, this broaden and build. If you can keep yourself focused on thinking, in a more positive way, which really comes down to just kind of being a little bit more relaxed when you're looking at the things that you need to do, then maybe you'll be more aware of the resources that are actually available to you. There's been times in my life where it'd be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? My daughter, I'm hearing things that, I just don't know what to do. And when I was able to be in a relaxed state of mind, I remember very vividly one time, all of a sudden the name of someone popped into my head as to somebody that I could talk to about this. And it was like, wow, I would never, that was a turning point. And it just kind of was a real example to me of, when you start kind of relaxing and trying not to focus just on the problem, you start becoming aware of more ways of resolving it. So again, can't say enough about just, making sure you're aware of the state you're in, so that you can, if you find you're just really sitting there like a little ball of stress, that you take steps to unravel that stress and just at least try to relax your body. There's a lot of positive psychology exercises that therapists may use. At the end of the day, write down 3 things you did that went well and what you did to contribute to that. That is a really powerful exercise. I've had students do that. I've done it myself, and you don't realize, after, several days of doing that, you start realizing, wow, I'm getting a lot done. I really have more control over what I do than I recognized that I did. Writing a gratitude letter, nothing feels better, I think, than letting someone know how much they mean to you and being sincere about it. And sometimes, we don't want to say it directly to the person because of maybe the way we anticipate they're going to react. And so this exercise is to write a letter and then read it to them. or send it to them. Sometimes just honestly writing the letter in and of itself is a benefit. And then just, kind of mindfulness. There's a lot going on right now in therapies and research about the impact of being mindful. And I know here on campus in our department we used to have kind of a mindful a day where everybody could have their lunch and we'd go into the conference room. People didn't talk, everyone just really paid attention to what they were eating. And we really need to start that again. We stopped doing it for some reason, but everybody really enjoyed that because sometimes we eat and we don't even know what we ate. We ate so fast, we were so busy thinking about things, we don't even know what they, and therefore now we're hungry an hour later. So the idea of personal wellness, this idea of trying to do what you can to be present. If you're present and you're focusing on the things that are in front of you right now, you're in a better place to be able to react to them. Because if you're constantly thinking about the past, you can't do anything about the past. If you're constantly thinking about what's coming up, yes, you can position yourself as well as you can, but you can't really impact yet what's coming up because you may not be actually realistic about what's coming up. But if you can stay focused in the present and make the best decisions you can given what you know in the present, then maybe the future is going to kind of take care of itself. Sometimes we just allow ourselves to get so distracted by ruminating over things that we have no control over anymore. They're done. They're gone. So part of being able to be in that state of mind is being in a healthy state yourself. So exercising, walking, just walking if you can, just getting, just using whatever parts of your body that you can. I realize not everybody has the same functioning as everybody else, but if you can maximize whatever functioning that you have, or with our clients, whatever functioning they have, at least they're exercising, that part of their body, and they're getting oxygen moving, and that's just overall helping your overall state of wellness. There are some recommendations, organizational, the question came up about, does the very system we work in ourselves, lend to depersonalization? Certainly organizationally, supervisors play a real key role. There should hopefully be support systems for employees. Improving the working relationships between the staff. It'd be nice if staff meetings weren't always on what the newest form is that has to be completed, but more about how, what supports are people finding are needed. I don't know. I know our staff meetings when I was a VR counselor was all about the process. But then we'd all go out for lunch, and that's when we really were able to support each other. So we often talk about it'd be kind of nice if, we kind of brought some of that into the staff meeting. And then it'd be great if supervisors provide feedback on a consistent basis, not just when they think you've done something wrong. What's happening? Okay. And then again, agency policies and procedures should be clearly defined and explained. People need to know what to expect. If you know what to expect, you can kind of be prepared better and you can make better decisions. If you can decrease the number of clients you're working with, that would be great, but that's not always in your control. And I realize that, but that is one way of being able that the bureaucracy, the system, could be able to help not only you, but the balancing the number of demanding clients that there is among counselors, so that not just one counselor had all the people with that had the highest needs. I know as a new VR counselor, when I started in the office, to help build the caseload, other counselors were helping me by referring their clients to me. And who were they referring to me? They were referring to me the clients that they had been struggling with for a long time and probably felt like maybe some fresh eyes on this would help. And therefore, I ended up having a caseload for a while that was really demanding. And I was a new counselor. So definitely I think that was contributing to my own experience with burnout because I was trying to learn how to be effective, and yet I had clients that, that were really, really challenging. hiring staff to handle the paperwork, making sure that the administrative assistants are being assistants and not taking on their job because you just need to get things done and it's not worth the hassle to, tell them, hey, I need you to do this for me. That's often a challenge in offices. You're lucky when you have a great assistant, and when you have a great assistant, make sure that they know you think that they are a great assistant and you appreciate it. Helping newer counselors, developing more realistic expectations, making sure that people know the positive aspects of the work as well as the challenges of the work, encouraging, having outside interests, exercising, doing social activities, I mean, going to fairs, going to events, recognizing there's so much more to work than just, there's so much more to life than just work. And also some agencies have wellness programs, so check those out if that's a possibility. I know that here at work, our insurance here as state employees, we're able to join this program called Real Appeal. And it's kind of like a Weight Watchers thing where it's online meetings every week that you join, but they give you a lot of support and a lot of information about, nutritional eating and exercises. It's really a very neat program, and there's probably 5 or 6 of us that have joined it. So it's kind of like we've got a support group through this program, but we also have a support group here at work. And that really is ideal. So if you can create something like that for yourself where you are, that would only benefit you. Ultimately, it benefits your clients. Another aspect that I'm really interested in as a individual and as someone who does research is the idea of resilience. What is it about some individuals who they are able to overcome what seem like insurmountable obstacles, and yet they maintain this wonderful attitude and this positivity about them, where other individuals seem like the least interruption, the least distraction just sets them off about how everything is screwed up. So what is it about an individual's own personal resilience that kind of helps us with our own well-being? And one of the things that I've gotten interested in, I know resilience is often seen as being an individual characteristic. We all build our own resilience in terms of having maybe a sense of humor, a sense of purpose. There's all sorts of factors. I did my dissertation on resilience among individuals with spinal cord injury and looked at what were the individual characteristics, what were some of the environmental characteristics that were present among those individuals who were found to be more resilient than others, and that was determined by an assessment instrument I had that assessed for level of resilience. And the challenge is that we can't always change the individual. But what I'm finding and what I've come to in my own view of resilience is there needs to be resources in our environment that we can access so that we can build our own resilience. A lot of resilience research is like, okay, how can we help individuals while they're in, inpatient care to help them build their resilience so when they're back out in the community, they can live well, they can, go back to employment and so forth. And so they, well, if I increase your problem-solving skills, if I increase your self-esteem in some way. But what the research shows is that doesn't really impact their resilience. And what I'm coming to think is that maybe it's because if we don't change things in the environment, in their environment, then it doesn't matter how we try to help them with problem solving and so forth. They've got to have resources in their environment to help them. So I've gotten interested in what do we need to do to provide for our clients, We're a resource to our clients. We're in their environment. We can help improve their resilience. But when you think about it the other way around, what's in your environment that can help increase or at least enhance your own resilience? And maybe you've got resources in your environment that you're not aware of because you're so focused on trying just to get through the day and get the things done you need to get done. You're not even aware that your company has access to a wellness program or provides a membership to a health club. My daughter's company provides them with a membership to Gold's Gym because they want to keep their employees healthy so they can keep their insurance rates low that they're paying for. So again, you know, sometimes you're not aware of the resources in your environment, but if you can take a step back and think about that, then maybe you can enhance your own resilience, which I think is one way of maintaining wellness. And again, just
So Dr. Catalano,
yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we've actually only got a minute left in our
Oh,
in your
wow.
presentation. We have
Oh gosh, okay.
and
You're
I know
like,
you have several more slides that you have left. And we can go on for a couple of more minutes, but I do know that some people have
have to
time
go.
frames that they need to.
No
Yeah,
worries.
and I do want to go ahead.
I am going to go to the last slide, and because everyone's got the PowerPoint. So, you know, I think the things, like I said, I'm not telling people things that they don't already know, but again, I love visuals, and I know whenever I'm on an airplane and they come out with, you know, here's what you do in case the plane's going down and, you know, there's no oxygen. Put the mask on yourself first, and then take care of the person next to you, even if that person is the most important person in the world to you. Put your own mask on first. So I am going to say, take care of yourself first, and you are going to be in a better position to take care of others around you, including family, including clients. I think that's just a great way to end this presentation.
Absolutely, absolutely fantastic, and what a wonderful visual and something that we hear a lot, and to apply it to our work situation is really nice, a nice visual. So just a reminder for everyone that you'll be receiving an email with an evaluation for today's webinar. And we always share our evaluation results with our speakers, so so knowing that will happen. But when we receive your evaluation back, that's when we will go ahead and put up your credit for it on your portal, on your individual portal, so that we have this recorded for your credits for as a CRC or as a CRP. So I want to thank everybody. I want to especially thank Dr. Catalano. What a wonderful amount of information, and thank you for all the wonderful research that you've done and the help that you're giving to us as professionals. So we really do appreciate you.
Well, thank you for asking me, and thank you to everybody who is in attendance for this. I mean, I wish you all well.
Okay. Y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.